Welcome to Your Brand Amplified, the podcast where we interview marketers, publicists, and brands to learn their stories, what makes them tick, and tips and tricks that make a difference. I'm so thrilled today to have Natalie Byrne, founder of Blank Space, on the show. Natalie, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat about what I'm most passionate about.
Yes, me too. And I'm so excited to actually get to see you. We were connected a few months ago from one of my colleagues at USC. And it's just really great because I know we've had a couple phone calls, but being able to see you and get that energy exchange going. So tell us what Blank Space is.
Great question. Blank Space. Well, the easy answer is Blank Space is an impact strategy firm. We work with businesses and founders and leaders and foundations on really living their legacy now, thinking about impact and purpose across everything they do and telling that story to the world. I like to think of Blank Space as that sort of pause that we can take as we're setting out in our usual business plans or product launches, or even thinking about how we show up as a leader. Take that moment to really intentionalize who we are and what we're doing and why we're doing it.
That's so important. And I think people are realizing more and more why that has to be important as part of not just their lives, but their businesses as well. When we don't take those times to pause and really reflect. But how did you decide that this was your life's mission and your purpose?
Well, I actually started beginning my career as a journalist. I've always been a storyteller, and really connecting people to other people's stories, other places in the world has just sort of been like my anchor. And as I saw the potential around business and I was working in the entertainment industry for a while, I really saw, how do we actually use these platforms to bring us together to move the needle on big issues? I got very excited about that early on. And this was way before, people were talking about impact. I was definitely one of those early pioneers, which didn't feel like a pioneer then. It felt like everyone above you telling you you're crazy. Had to go figure something else out. But I just really saw that this was the way that we were connecting with people and audiences. So no matter if someone was selling a product or building a business or telling a story, through television or film, I really saw the connection point there and, worked my way through corporate world, corporations, multinationals. I actually, before I started my business, I like to say my alma mater was at Unilever, which is one of the best companies in the world you can work on with purpose because they are so committed to it. When I was doing the work in there with brands and with founders, and, Blank Space launched naturally as the next chapter.
Nice. Yeah, I look at your LinkedIn and the amount of experience that you have and what you've accomplished in your career is just mind-boggling. All of the brands that you've worked for, whether it was in entertainment or beauty, and then Unilever, it's amazing. And I love that you figured out that this was your purpose out of all of those and what that was kind of the through line in your work.
100%. And that I can help other people connect to that. I think what started as more, even given what you're speaking about around how we're amplifying brands and even some of the marketing sides of that is what started out as a way, like I said, to connect and be better storytellers and do better business actually has evolved to, I think, the through line of business in general and how we're moving forward. I mean, brands that are launching today have to have a value proposition for the world, or else they will be very quickly outdated in the marketplace. And so I love how you said kind of my special power or my personal purpose there. Now I get so much joy to connect leaders and business leaders to that in themselves and realizing that there's not like a department that needs to work on impact. This is actually a through line for them in their career as well.
Yeah. What do you say? Because I think you started your company in 2019, so pre-pandemic. I'm sure you saw some changes happen. And obviously during the pandemic, people became more aware of needing to be socially mission-driven, conscious, show who they are and show up with their values. But one thing I've still seen in the market is also that some of the companies might have great D&I statements on their website, but then when people get into their companies, they don't see the same values internally that the company is saying that they have externally. So is that something that you help people work through as well?
Yes. And yeah, to your point, we started early 2019 and it was like a lightning bolt of change and with the pandemic. And I was watching the people who were like doing really fun things like singing songs with gummy bears all over their, apartments and like organizing. It was the opposite for me. It was almost like the busiest time of my entire life because it felt like the whole world woke up and, we were there to help on everything. Just like everyone, we were like all hands on whatever we can help with partnership, strategy, business stuff, and this included a lot of food insecurity work. There was a lot of hungry people during that time, a lot of thinking of wellness, a lot of diversity and equity with all of the racial reckonings that we had to come look at and face as a country. And so to your point, so many companies got pulled into something that they just weren't really ready for. And we were very excited to help, especially the ones who were genuinely stepping forward saying, we need to do better. And I feel very strongly that we've actually moved now into sort of this very quick to cancel, quick to point fingers kind of a culture. And there are so many people out there that want to do this right. And I'm there to help support them and get into the weeds. And by no means would I do anything that felt tacked on or for the wrong reasons. We get very deep into the work and look across leadership, across boards, across how supply chains are compromised, how employees are a part of the process. So every single facet has to be a part of this work for it to be authentic and true. And now on the other side of these past few years, like you're saying, if a company isn't doing this work, they will be called out. They will be held accountable. And so much work now that I'm doing with CEOs is actually helping them navigate being activists because we are asking CEOs to stand up for their beliefs. We want to know what a company's value is. So to say the world has changed, it definitely has changed. And we definitely feel strongly that we're there to help, really help be a partner in this.
Yeah. So how does somebody typically come into finding out about Blank Space? Is it you approach them, they approach you, they hear about you from somebody else who worked with you or one of the accolades that you've received?
Yes, I have a couple nicknames behind the scenes. Founder Whisperer is one. Another one is our no person. I'm taken seriously in the space because I've been doing it for so long and I tend to be there strategically guiding in a lot of those rooms, right? So most of my clients come from word of mouth or, recommendation. We are getting out there a lot more now, though. I've started to step out because what I've realized in this new era that we're talking about, that people really don't know what good looks like. There's a struggle around how to do this work well. So I'm very passionate about scaling the wisdom out from just behind the scenes for, the 1% of leaders and companies that I work with. It's like, how can we actually really help everyone think about this? How can we think about how we're observing and taking in companies? So I'm stepping out a little bit more on that side now too.
Nice. Yes. And that's why we're here today. Yay.
Exactly. I need some help.
So when you work with people, I'm sure it's not one size fits all. It's not cookie cutter. Can you talk through, maybe you don't have to name a business or a client if you don't want to, but I'd love to hear somebody who came to you maybe that you were able to really help them shape and drive their impact and have those aha moments. And then I'd love to also hear on the other side, have you ever had the experience of somebody coming to work with you and you've just had to say, nope, you're not ready, or
Yes, on both. And like I said, we won't go away. So if it's like a nope, you're not ready, it's a nope, you're not ready, but this is what I would look at and think about and come back and like, let's keep talking. Like, again, we're not here to be part of like shaming in the macro. I actually just wrote a piece for all those who kind of want to follow the journey. I'm Substack about do's and don'ts and what's working and not. And I just wrote a piece about everything with Bud Light, to name a brand that's been struggling around this recently in a very public way, because it's very hard when you haven't done the work, which is the other half of your question. So I love how you frame this. If you haven't done the work to know who you are, know what your why is and why you're doing something, then as you try to make these decisions, it's very easy for the world to see that there wasn't any thinking behind them and they feel reactionary. So I encourage folks who kind of want a case study on, I really dissected in there what they could have done better and even going forward. For really good models, I mean, we have the blank space method, which really starts with the DNA. I think that this purpose work and your value is baked into who the company is in its DNA, I say. And this isn't something you're tacking on. It's not like today we support women because women are trendy, like it has to be like, who are you as a company? What are the communities you serve? What is the products? Like, how are you changing people's lives for the better just by existing? What is the message that is inherent to your brand? And then from there, we can chisel in this work and build it out in like a 360 scope. And a really good example from the past few years that I love to share, because it's one of those instances where sometimes this work gets so big and so powerful that it's even bigger than one brand, and it becomes a coalition or an industry way we can make change. So we've seen movements around this in fashion, around sustainability practices. Like, how can we share things and make it better? The one that I'm thinking of now was the work we did with WW, which was Weight Watchers, to really say, okay, there's a lot of people who have nutrition insecurity right now. And you guys are looking at this from a macro for your client base every day. How can we bring our brand partners, all of the food companies that you touch, all the wellness companies you touch, and even we had financial partners like Bank of America as part of the coalition. And we launched the Healthy Living Coalition that really looked at how we can use our best practices in our businesses to move the needle for nutrition and wellness for everyone. And during the pandemic, this was very important work. We've seen a rise in hunger and nutrition insecurity more than we've ever seen. And we're in really kind of desperate times right now around that. So I was very excited to do something meaningful with a company that wanted to share its values and then also bring all of its partners along just to get it bigger and bigger.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like you really hit the nail on the approach that you take. I always tell people your brand is not your logo. Your brand is your purpose, mission, vision, values, your positioning, how you're showing up every day.
Yes.
No matter if you're a service, a product, or whatever. And what you're doing with large companies is exactly what small businesses and new entrepreneurs need to know as well.
Yes. I do webinars and seminars. I actually just led one in LA with 100 different entrepreneurs, both in person and we did it online around that, like baking it in right from the beginning. You know, if you are a community restaurant, cafe, if you're a bakery, if you have a service company that you're serving a part of your own community, this is essential. It's part of what brings people in. You have these storefronts here that become community hubs. I actually have a client that invests just in this because it's so, so important to really be thinking about how we're building up these small businesses that make up our neighborhoods. And so where I can layer in purpose work, and a lot of my work with C-suite ends up being thought leadership, but I can do that for a small community business as well. So I'm very passionate about that.
I love that you said that because I work with Best Start South LA and Rising Communities, and we have sustainability hubs set up in the neighborhood. And a lot of them are primarily in neighborhood stores. And so lifting up the stories of the grantees and the places where you can go, and certain days of the week, you could go get food if you are food insecure, or you can do a training or do different things, but creating that community around like-minded issues and needs in these.
Well, I will definitely connect you to Found LA, which is the Whirlwind Foundation signature initiative that Jane Whirlwind, who is the former, she was leading Dermalogica with Raymond, her husband, and now they are really focused on building up these small businesses in Los Angeles. So I'll be happy to connect you into that initiative because we have to do more together.
Yeah, exactly. This is amazing. So you were saying that you do keynotes and workshops with smaller businesses who might not be able to afford to come in and be a retainer client or work with you on a bigger level, but they can still learn the techniques and tactics that you use as part of the blank space method.
Yes. And I want to launch something. So stay tuned. I'll follow up with you once I get maybe some sort of, if I could put a webinar together that then people could download, maybe on my website, or, if not in this area or they're not hearing about it, that is on my list of how can I help share this with more people.
Fantastic. Now, when you're doing this work, how is it impacting you?
I mean, as an entrepreneur, and, I have to remind myself that you can't just work, constantly, that part of being in your purpose and, the philosophy of blank space is having that connection to yourself, taking that time to really listen, to lead, with your heart and not be like crazed running around all the time. So I definitely try to do that type of work myself. It also holds me to a high bar of my own integrity because what and how I show up is so important for how I can help raise the bar. And then also I would say it affects me because I always have my ear to the ground. I'm always learning and out there and trying to see what's working and not, and asking questions. I am definitely like one of the most curious people. I always laugh, like, don't leave me unsupervised because I'll get right into the mess and like try to see what's happening. And yeah. Maybe it's the journalist in me still.
Yeah. When you moved from being an employee to being an entrepreneur and starting your own business, what was that transition like for you? There are a lot of people who have that dream of going out and doing their own thing, but it can be scary.
Yes, I would say I get that question a lot. Like when I come off of a panel or someone's coming, especially young, people new in the workforce, kind of hungry, maybe they're in college or just graduated or going a different path. I actually say that experience of being inside and working is what has made my business successful. I took understanding how these companies think and work and was able to really infuse that into what makes us very successful as partners to these companies. I think it's hard to advise or step into a role like mine if you haven't been inside for a considerable amount of time. So I always encourage that, like have a bunch of jobs, wear multiple hats. No part of your journey is ever off course, right? Like everything informs the next job you take or the next position you have. So I definitely encourage that, rolling up your sleeves and doing some hard work ahead. And then, I've actually had a couple bosses say I wasn't a great employee as I was always everywhere. I'm so good out in the field. So they'd be like, this is way before, virtual Zoom life. And they'd be like, where is Natalie? Why is she in this meeting? Why isn't she in this meeting? And I'm like, oh, no, I have to be in DC right now because this is where the action's happening. Trust me on this. So I would come into these positions and really say, for me to do my job really well, I have to be inside outside because we're really looking at how the world is moving and being a part of that in an authentic way. So I wasn't like the best employee. I would be like, oh, shoot, I forgot to fill out my time thing. Am I going to get paid this week? That kind of stuff. But it makes for a very good visionary. It makes very good strategist and kind of using both sides of my creative and strategic brain to do well now as a business owner.
Yeah, I think that makes you the best kind of business owner, though, is that you have both sides of the brain so they can come together.
Yes. And I guess saying, another way of saying this is that my former bosses would probably all laugh like, yeah, you were always an entrepreneur. We used to call it an entrepreneur, and people have that in them. So if you're sitting there and you're like, I just want to hustle so hard, I have a burning idea, I see the blank space in this industry where what I do is needed, then go for it at 150%. But if you don't have that, it's very, very hard. So, maybe take into consideration, is there another company that I can build this within or do this with that maybe it's not me out on my own, and kind of having a real conversation with yourself on how you work and your habits and all of that.
Yeah. That's a really good point. I know I feel that because I now have merged into another company. So I'm an employee, but I have the flexibility and freedom to be very entrepreneurial in my role. And if I didn't have that, I couldn't do it.
Yes. Yes, I hear you.
Yeah.
But that's a perfect example of how you could build things within other things. Like, there's so many ways this can look. And I think we maybe over glamified the idea of the entrepreneur, but it's hard and you have to sustain it. I don't like this misrepresentation of starting a company to sell it. I don't believe in that. I think we should be starting something because we love it and this is part of us. And that's the difference. So someone comes to me saying, I'm starting this company so I can sell it in 2 years. I'm like, that's kind of boring.
Yeah. Yeah. Because then what are they going to do next? Right?
Probably be unsatisfied.
Yeah. You have been featured at South by Southwest. You've worked for the United Nations, Cannes, Sundance, Fox, the White House, and many, many other platforms. What would you say was one of your favorites and really made an impact on you and how you work, or you got to see how you're making an impact in a larger way?
Well, I'll say my favorite speaking opportunity and trip was traveling with President Obama on his homecoming trip to Kenya. It was a life-changing. He brought together some of us to go and work and speak and train the next generation of African entrepreneurs. And it was just one of those moments where you're like, wow, there's so much innovation in this country that we aren't even aware of here. And I'm only tapping the surface. And what does it look like for me to be able to do this work globally? And I think that really sparked a lot for me. So that was one of those moments where you kind of see the potential of the impact and then also the honor of being one of his delegates there. So that was great. But as far as conferences here and some of them that you named, I've always loved South by. I'm kind of like one of those OG South by people because it's starting to changed now, but what I love is that it brings together so many different types of people into one mix. Now they're starting to separate it out a little bit more, but you have like music and marketing and tech and food and fashion and CEOs and people who are new to it. And I love that mix. I love the idea of unlikely partners and people getting out of their bubbles, where some of the more industry focused conferences, it is sort of just like one industry speaking to one set of people. So I do love that. Cannes is a really fun one too, because it's so much marketing and it's global, and you get a little bit of those new perspectives from that. And also it's just fun, to have an excuse to be like, climate and this is so great. But I think that conferences too are kind of having a reckoning, because we went from a pandemic where we weren't gathering and now everyone wants to gather. And I'm seeing it, especially as we look at this next year. People are saying, why am I here? What am I doing? What is the value of the conversations and the thought leadership I'm receiving, the partnerships? Like, we're really starting to hone in on, I'm going to say more is less. And I like to be in the right rooms and very, very deliberate about that moving forward.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Not everywhere. And I do that with my clients too. Let's not be everywhere. Let's be in the right places. And one is usually an industry conference, and one is probably something that's completely out of their bubble, where I think that people need to learn from them and they can learn from their own.
Actually, that was my next question that you just teed up perfectly, was talking about the thought leadership. Like, once you start working with a CEO and you get them to figure out what their infusion is and the impact that they're going to make, then what happens next? She stood out a little bit. Industry conferences, other spaces that you think that they need to be seen in?
Yes. The philosophy of Blank Space is the do and the say. What are we doing? And how are we telling the world about it in an authentic way? Because we can't be doing this in silos. Everyone needs to know. So many people love to be like, oh, it's like, people have, to your point, how you started the podcast, like these marketing campaigns that maybe don't really have anything to do with how they're actually treating DEI inside. It's just like this pulling on your heartstrings, like commercial. And no. We focus on the do. What are we doing? We do it well. And then we talk about it. And when we talk about it, we talk about it in a big way. Like I said, with the example, like where we can bring the whole industry with us, because the whole point is to move business forward, move culture forward, move our philanthropic work forward, all of that. So to the natural progression of the work is thought leadership. It's something I really love. I think that the way someone says something, the words that they use, speaking from their heart, sharing it into the right spaces has the potential to move the needle. And, this goes back to where you and I were chatting about a little bit earlier, that CEOs can be activists. Their companies can stand for something. And what does that look like authentic? And how can I do my job right so that everyone who works there and the people who are touched by this company or by their product are part of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely want to link your Substack article about Budweiser. So I think one of the things that's so interesting about that whole scenario is they've always been supportive of the community, the LGBTQIA plus community, but maybe it wasn't a big enough part of their impact statement.
For me, it's not that. It's more of knowing why they're doing something before they do it, so that when they get backlash, they can handle it appropriately. And I think what happened is that the research I've been able to do around the decision-making process, I tried to get much into the back. And I can see, from the work I do very clearly when something is fleshed out or not. But to your point, this isn't like we're bad. I think they made some good movements forward. Then they kind of really wanted to reach a new audience, target. So they started to do couple maybe gimmicky things in order to talk to a specific target, but they didn't have the back strategy on the why they were doing it. So then when something hit the fan with some of their other base being upset about those decisions, they actually had nothing to say. They had nothing to point to. They had no response, and they actually fired their senior leadership who made the decision. And I thought all of those were really clear signs that they were just missing the why. And, day in and day out, we work with brands of all sizes to help them strategize what, when, why, and how to use their platform for positive, authentic impact. So if they are going to take a stand, they know why they're taking it. And there's this wishy-washy. And at the end of the day, they ended up upsetting both sides of their market. So it was a disaster, to say the least. And they're not the first brand to do this. But let me think of a good example, because I like to focus on good. And
yeah, absolutely.
Like Campbell's a couple of years ago, actually, they were one of the first commercials that had a very obvious same-sex parenting couple giving their child Campbell's soup. And that was it. They didn't say anything about where they stand on issues in the ad, but it was obviously a very specific thing. And then, they had some people who are their consumer upset by that ad. They were jarred by it and were outspoken. But Campbell's, who did the work, said, we believe, I don't remember the statement, but it was something along the lines of American families are who we care about. That's what our product is for American families. And we think that American families look like many things. And we're so happy to be able to support them, for them to be a part of our community. And then that shut everyone up. Like, that was it. That's what they stood for. That's why they made it. It wasn't a whole big thing. It didn't turn into an avalanche. And that clearly they did the work. Clearly they said, this is an important issue to us. How can we authentically show that we support this community and that they're part of our family too?
Yeah. Do you think one of the issues right now is that marketing, so many people are thinking about like, what's the hot new platform? How do we go viral? How do we stand out?
Yes.
In that way. And so they're not thinking about those things in intentional manner.
Yeah. They think that a TikTok or something on social media with an influencer is an answer, and it needs to be such a small piece of a huge puzzle. So yes, you are hitting it right on the head. And that's why we get recommended to work with people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Wonderful. So what is next for you in Blank Space?
Well, like we were talking about, I really want to scale this wisdom that's been kind of behind the scenes. So thinking about that, how can I create some webinars or products or things that I can share that more people can reach? I get that a lot. Like, can I see your talk on this or this? And I'm like, okay, I need to think about taking some of this and creating some scale. So I'm focused on that. I'm really excited about the clients I'm working with and the work that we're doing. I think that we're at a point now where we are innovating for the future. This is the future of business. This is where we all need to go. So, if you're a company or you're interested in this work, please reach out. We love to do this. It's something that it's just so meaningful to me. It's part of my own legacy.
I think that's the ultimate thing. This is all part of your legacy and what you're leaving behind. And, and you're going to affect so many more people by helping them figure out what their legacy and what their purpose and legacy is going to be.
Yes, because I don't believe that legacy is it's like something after you die. I think you live your legacy today. This is something that's happening every single day. It's how you show up to get your coffee matters. How you show up in your job, what you do, like the integrity you have in the work that you're doing. All of this matters. And I encourage people to live their legacy now.
Wonderful. I usually ask if somebody has a favorite quote or mantra or words of wisdom. I think you just shared some, but I don't know if you have any others you'd love to share as well.
Yeah, no, that would definitely be what I would encourage everyone to reflect on who's thinking about this and might be thinking about how they line up to it. And, I'm trying to think if there's one that is coming to mind, a quote. I guess I could say the one that I've had directing for me for a long time, which is just by Andy Warhol. They say times change, but sometimes you have to change them yourself, because if we're not doing the work, who's going to do it? There you go. Awesome. It's on my social media. You'll see that at the top of my Instagram page. It's like, guys, you got to roll up your sleeves. We got to make this change together because no one else is going to do it.
I love that. And Natalie, what's the easiest way for someone to follow you? Is it your name? Is it Blank Space on social?
Yeah. So on Instagram, I'm NATM Byrne, not M Byrne. So that's an easy place. Natalie Marie Byrne on LinkedIn. And then our website, blankspaceworks.com. Definitely sign up for the Substack newsletter because it'll keep you abreast of what we're thinking about and has tips and tricks, like I said, for companies and leaders on how to navigate.
Nice. Thank you so much. I love this conversation. I've written down so many things to talk about as soon as we get done this interview.
Yay.
And I cannot wait to see what you do next and to get involved.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. And more for us to work on too.
Oh, yes. Yes. And to the audience, thank you for listening to Natalie's inspiring story. I love that she's so intentional about the work she does. And this is a reminder to all of you to also be intentional about everything that you do. Start with that and embed it into your DNA, as Natalie says, and you'll go a lot further and do a lot better and make a lot more impact on your customers, clients, and the world around you. With that, I'll be back again in a few days with another amazing expert guest. Want more? Check out amplifywithannika.com or follow me on socials at amplifywithannika.